switch to the perspective of an ordinary classroom teacher who has some immigrant students in that classroom. And what advice would you have to this teacher? What are they supposed to do?
Right, that's a good question. Because if teachers are not prepared originally, it's quite harrowing, right, to think about, I have a student and I have to teach a curriculum that that I know I must teach because I want the students to do well and I want them to learn, but I can't communicate with the student. How do I do this? And it can be overwhelming at first, but I think that we have tools at our disposal and we have to sort of take a step back and think about what's in front of us, ahead of us. For a student, first is really to think about the student at the center of instruction. So as an educator, I need to know a lot about that student before I can make an instructional decision. And I would say start there. First I would want to know, who is my student? How do I pronounce her name? How do I know where she's from? How do I know what languages she knows already? And I mean more than one, languages. And what are her literacy abilities in those languages? What does she love to learn? What does she love to read? What do her parents speak and use at home? Do they use multiple languages? They may use a different language for religious purposes than a language that they use for work purposes and so on. So I want to know those linguistic resources of the student first. And when the student comes in, I want to make sure that my instruction is really targeted to helping that student learn. That's my task. Whether the student initially can get to the standards and the curriculum I have, that's a different question. But right now, a new student coming in, I need to know about that student. And I also need to make sure that my classroom environment, my linguistic environment, reflects that student's identity. I want to make sure that if the student speaks Ukrainian, that I have, and can read and write Ukrainian, that I have materials in my classroom that the student sees that her language is important. Her family is important. Her culture is important. I want my classroom to reflect the multiple language resources of that student and family. So I want my classroom to be very welcoming. I want the student to feel that she is affirmed here and that I understand that she's got a task ahead of her and I'm on her, so I'm here to help. I'm here to be here with her. Now, I think there are lots of other things that happen in between, but initially I would say for a teacher, if you can start there, you're off to a good start. If you don't start there, I don't know how you are going to get to the curriculum that you think you know you need to teach, because you already haven't figured out your starting point. So just from there, I think is a good, and then we could talk about strong instructional practices from there.
Yeah, right. So after these things that happen at the beginning, then how to teach the curriculum to this student who doesn't know the language of the school, the language of instruction yet?
Right. This is really important. So first, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that teachers need to understand what linguistic demands are coming from the curriculum for those students. So even in a lower primary level, there's language of school that is complicated language, and teachers need to see what that language is all about, and know where it can pose problems for their learners right away. So there's the idea of knowing the curriculum and knowing the language of the curriculum. And then sometimes, and teachers say this quite a lot, when students have come from refugee backgrounds with interrupted formal education, or interrupted learning because of moving and so on, and mobility issues, then they may not have access to that grade level curriculum in their first language. And teachers wonder, so I had a teacher recently last year with the pandemic talk about how she was a fourth grade teacher, and she purposefully chose fourth grade because she didn't want to be responsible, for instance, for teaching the alphabet to students and teaching students how to write their names. But what she learned in 4th grade, especially with pandemic and interrupted education, was that she had to go back and teach those things. And this may be the case. If a teacher is teaching 3rd grade, 4th grade, and a student comes in with interrupted education who doesn't understand the alphabet in Polish, or the alphabet in English, then that teacher's teaching the alphabet to that student and is teaching early literacy skills to that student. That's part of it. That's laying a foundation for further learning, and that's part of grade level learning, the grade level placement of students that's appropriate. Then the teacher also needs to think about ways to differentiate her materials. So if she's teaching 4th grade, if she's teaching 2nd grade seasons and the weather, for instance, right? That's the standard part of the curriculum. And she might need to figure out how to simplify the language of that curriculum and create materials that are accessible to the student. And this is where backing up, understanding what students can already do in their first language and knowing what they can do in their second language, Polish or English, matters. Because if I know, for instance, that I'm teaching 2nd grade and I have a student who seems pretty proficient orally and can speak English pretty well, well, that's a really important data point for me. I know that I can speak with that student. But that student might not really have writing skills in English, that's grade level writing skills. That means I need to figure out what my student can do in writing. Might be different than oral language, than speaking, but in writing, and I need to figure out how I can differentiate my materials and break apart the language so the student can actually perform a task and demonstrate that she learned the content. That might mean not writing a paragraph, that might mean in 2nd grade not writing 2 sentences. It might mean just drawing a line from an image, from one image to another, showing that she understands that this word means autumn, and she can point to the picture or draw a line to the picture. So because she might not have the writing ability yet. But she's learning the content. We have to start by building. We can't start by the curriculum at the grade level and expecting the student to get there. We have to start by the student, what the student can do in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then differentiate, get the student from this point to the next point. That's a big task, and it takes time, but that's really what teachers need to work on.
So once again, evaluation. Evaluate the skills the student has at different levels.